Thank you for your participation and being with us this afternoon. I'm Karen Jocelyn, the founder of the Haitian Women's Collective, and it's always good to be with you, particularly on this topic, which is of such interest. Before we move forward, for those of you who need Creole access, pou moun kap pale Creole yo bien tande, ka tande en Creole, nap gade en bas écran kon ti globe qui écrit interprétation. Nou kapab peze li, klike sou li, et puis nap chwazi e Creole pou kapab tande nou en Creole. To speakers also, we're asking everyone to try to speak slowly. For us in New York, we talk really fast so that the interpreters can best do their work. So I met with Georgie several months ago to talk about this issue of peace and peace building, which obviously is a real need in Haiti at this time, and certainly over several years. We've been impacted by so much between natural disasters, gangs that have taken over a large percentage of the country, as well as political instability, a fragile government, and so on. So this past week, last week, the week before that, many who are in the New York area due to the General Assembly, as well as Climate Week and so forth. And one of my mentors, or someone that I honor, Prime Minister from Barbados, Mia Motley, took the stage, as she always does so well. And so I wanted to share, as we get started, some of her words before I bring on our first speaker, who will be Diana Duarte. So Prime Minister Motley said, "We are now regrettably confronted by multiple theaters of war and scenes of horror and famine flowing from war, armed conflict, instead of pursuing the development of citizens of every country." She said that it was incumbent on leaders to deliver new opportunities and solutions to these crises, which dampen economic growth and restrict the ambitions of our people and numb our sense of the beauty and goodness that the world ought to be offering. She continues to say there are a few areas where the world is more in need of the United Nations acting as the United Nations to secure the objective of the Charter than an area of peace and security. She added that the UN Security Council needs reform, underlying that the current configuration of permanent and non-permanent members has no place in the 21st century. She highlighted areas where she felt reason for optimism, including the adoption by global leaders of a pact for the future. Ultimately, she said, above all else, we need a global reset on peace. There needs to be global peace, and it can't be too difficult to work for peace. So certainly that statement is quite optimistic. And the work that many of us all do around the world, but certainly also in Haiti, optimism is sometimes hard to hold on to, but the importance of peace as our folks and our people live in fear during this time, and some horror, obviously violence, certainly increased violence against women and girls is a real issue for the Haitian Women's Collective and our various partners across the country. So when we thought about bringing this together, I thought, who are the two best people that we can have lead us on? Because we would like to continue a conversation around peace throughout this year, and certainly throughout next year, to integrate not only conversations and actions. And so I'm really grateful that Diana Duarte from Madre has agreed to join us today. I'm turning here so I can see her bio. Diana is the Director of Policy and Strategic Engagement. She leads Madre's work to advance a more feminist, care-based, and just US policy. She directs the Feminist Policy Jumpstart Program, which uses advocacy and public education to shape progressive US policy making spaces. Her efforts have a particular focus on anti-militarist, I think I said that right, peace building and just climate policy. Throughout her career, she has worked on human rights, peace, and justice. She's a great ally to the Haitian Women's Collective. I've certainly learned a lot from her and her leadership. And so it's really an honor today to have Diana Duarte join us. Good afternoon, Diana.
Thank you so much, Corinne. It's really a pleasure to be here with you. I have to start off by saying that we're so grateful for the opportunity to partner with you and with all the folks of the Haitian Women's Collective and to support the vital peace building work that you all do. Again, my name is Diana and I'm with Madre. And for folks who may not be as familiar with Madre, we're an international human rights organization and a feminist fund. And we've spent now decades supporting feminist peace building efforts all around the globe, both again as a grant maker and as an advocacy organization that works in both US and international policy spaces. And when I think about our approach, our grassroots-driven approach really reflects a deep commitment to amplifying the voices of marginalized communities and movements, working at the intersection of gender justice, human rights, and peace building. And from our work in places like Haiti, but also Iraq, Sudan, Afghanistan, Yemen, Colombia, we've worked to support rural and indigenous women's organizations in places like Kenya and Nicaragua. We've had really many years to form our understanding of both the challenges and the opportunities of feminist peace building. And we've learned many lessons thanks to our partners' wisdom and expertise that they've shared with us about what works to foster sustainable peace in communities. And I should name that in our advocacy work, we've also learned many lessons about what works and also what obstacles we have to navigate to bring these invaluable perspectives to shape policymaking. And so thank you again for the invitation, and I'll share some of those lessons that we've gathered with you all here today. And, first and foremost, centering the lived experiences of people most impacted by conflict and war is the surest path to peace. And we have found that the best way to do that work of centering those lives is to partner with grassroots women's organizations. And that's my very first basic lesson. And I'm sorry to say that that is a lesson that has yet to be learned by those in charge of most peace processes. Because time and again, we've seen that negotiations are dominated by the demands of belligerents, of people in power, oftentimes men with guns. And that's often what is to blame for stalled negotiations that go nowhere or for peace agreements that fall apart. But when you include women's leadership in those processes, you can escape that destructive spiral. And to be clear, that's not because women are somehow innately more peaceful. It's because women's movements and organizations are often embedded in communities, meeting their most urgent needs in conflict, and then able to channel those priorities into peace and policymaking processes, which can then help legitimate those peace processes. And the result is often a more representative and inclusive peace agreement that research has shown is 35% more likely to last at least 15 years. So in our strategies, we create channels for grassroots feminist organizations to do that vital work to shape peace processes. So for example, in Colombia, after decades of civil war, women and Afro and indigenous communities were bearing the brunt of displacement and violence. And through our partnerships with grassroots organizations, Madre effectively supported the incorporation of women's voices, particularly, again, Afro-descendant and indigenous women, into the Colombian peace process, where they could push for reparations for survivors of sexual violence and push for the recognition of women's leadership in community rebuilding efforts. The second lesson that I'd like to share is that we have to ensure that our efforts address structural inequalities and root causes that underpin violence and conflict. In communities around the world, we've seen that peace cannot be achieved without tackling the basic drivers of conflict. Georgie, I see your hand is up. Should I
Yes,
pause?
sorry to interrupt, Diana. Can you please slow down?
Yes.
That would
I
be
knew
great.
this was going to
Thank you.
happen. Corinne warned me as a New Yorker, I have to talk slower, but yes.
Thank you. Really
Um,
appreciate that.
No, thank you for the reminder. So again, we know that peace can't be achieved unless we tackle the basic drivers of conflict. And what I mean by that are root causes of inequality like land dispossession, racial discrimination, environmental degradation, and of course, patriarchal norms. And there are ways to do that by aligning peace building efforts with other movements that are struggling for racial or economic or environmental justice and more. We can broaden the scope of what peace building means and what it can achieve. And importantly, we can combine our powers across movements, across peace, climate, racial justice, and other movements to make our shared success more likely. And this cross-movement understanding allows for a more holistic approach to peace, one that goes beyond things, like disarmament, which is important in political negotiations, to address the root causes of conflict. A third lesson that I want to share is one that feminists, and especially Black feminists, have taught for decades, and that is about the value of intersectionality in feminist peace building. Intersectionality recognizes that women's experiences of conflict are shaped not only by their gender, but also by other identities, including race, ethnicity, class, sexual orientation, and others. So as an example, in Kenya, Madre's collaboration with indigenous Maasai women has illustrated how feminist peacebuilding must account for these intersecting forms of discrimination faced by women. In these communities, peacebuilding efforts have to contend with both the gender inequality and marginalization of indigenous women, and marginalization because of their indigenous identity. So for instance, the Maasai women face challenges related to land rights, climate change, and patriarchal norms that exclude them from decision-making processes. And so Madre's support for these women focuses on ensuring that they can advocate for their rights within local and national political structures. So the lesson here is that feminist peacebuilding has to be adaptable and responsive to the specific needs and identities of the people that we partner with, recognizing that their experiences of conflict are shaped by multiple and overlapping forms of oppression. And the fourth lesson that I'll share, and one that is truly at the heart of all of our work, is that about building solidarity across borders, because that is fundamentally how we build the power to create the change that we seek. Madre's work across many different regions highlights this value of building transnational feminist solidarity. And oftentimes we've found that peace-building efforts in one context can inform and inspire similar movements elsewhere, creating this web of interconnected struggles. I'll share a few examples and memories of that. I remember when the civil war broke out in Syria over a decade ago, one of the most powerful actions that we took was to support an international convening of women peace builders from places like Syria, Afghanistan, Colombia, Ireland, and beyond. And they came together to lend their best expertise and strategies and solidarity to Syrian women who were experiencing this heightened level of catastrophe. I've also been on calls where a partner from Yemen gave really practical but also inspiring advice to a young activist from the Philippines who spoke about the fear and the anxiety that she felt about being targeted and retaliated against because of her peacebuilding activism. And this was an experience that they both shared. And so they spoke to each other from their unique but also overlapping experiences as feminist peace builders, even though they were separated by thousands of miles, but still united in this partnership. We've also brought together Indigenous women from Guatemala and Nicaragua to share about their lived experiences of conflict and the violent discrimination that they have faced as Indigenous women and the strategies they've employed to build their power. So this cross-border solidarity is crucial for exchanging strategies, sharing resources, and amplifying marginalized voices in policymaking arenas, because it allows feminist peace builders to learn from one another, to build a more cohesive and powerful movement for gender justice and for peace. So those are some key lessons that I wanted to share. And while these lessons learned from our experience doing feminist peace building work are really invaluable to us, I have to also acknowledge that there are significant challenges that remain in being able to translate grassroots leadership into formal policy spaces. And this is some of what I wanted to name next. The first major challenge, of course, is the marginalization and dismissal of grassroots voices in formal peace processes and policymaking, even in contexts where women have played a crucial, obvious role in advocating for peace and rebuilding their communities. They are often still excluded from decision-making tables. And of course, this exclusion is particularly pronounced for those women who face additional barriers to their political participation because of their identities or because of geographic isolation or poverty or entrenched patriarchal norms. And I'll give an example. In Sudan, where we work, women, and especially young women, played an incredible, indispensable role in advocating for democracy and an end to their country's dictatorship. And what's more, today, grassroots women's organizations have been essential in helping people survive as their country has collapsed into civil war. Yet, they were excluded from the transitional governance process and continue to be sidelined in peace negotiations. In Haiti, also amidst a deep crisis, women also remain excluded from transitional governance discussions and policymaking at the local and international levels, even as they have come together to advance a very clear and organized policy framework for effective and equitable transition. And I know that folks at the Haitian Women's Collective and Korean can probably speak a lot more to that. So while this marginalization remains a challenge, there are still opportunities to advocate for more inclusive peace processes, especially when we partner across borders, as I mentioned earlier. Grassroots organizations supported by Madre have made real strides in pushing for policy changes that recognize the importance of women's leadership in peace building. And we can look to our work in Yemen, for an example. The US played a significant role in fueling that conflict. Meanwhile, women leaders from Yemen and their expertise have too seldom played a part in the policy debate in Washington, D.C. So we partner with Yemeni women-led organizations, not only to resource their life-saving on-the-ground work, but also to create channels for them to engage directly with US policymakers. And we've done some similar work in partnership with the Haitian Women's Collective, again, creating channels for partners to demand the full participation of women in discussions around Haiti's transition. And I have to say, there is power in this persistent pressure and advocacy, and we can do that better when we do it together. And that's an important role that Madre plays to support grassroots organizations to keep up that pressure and keep the doors open for policy change. Another significant challenge, of course, in bridging grassroots leadership into policy spaces is the lack of resources and the lack of institutional support for women's organizations. Grassroots feminist groups often operate with limited funding and face significant logistical challenges when it comes to engaging with policy processes. In many cases, they may be asked to participate in a peace-building effort, but without the necessary financial or technical support to ensure meaningful participation. And that dynamic can result in a sort of tokenistic inclusion where a limited number of women's voices are invited, but not truly heard and not truly influential. And those groups may lack the institutional connections or political influence to be able to effectively engage with policymakers. And so that disconnect can limit their ability to influence national or international peace processes, despite their expertise and their insights. But again, there's hope. To address these challenges, there are opportunities to strengthen grassroots organizations and build alliances with civil society actors who can help bridge the gap between grassroots movements and policy spaces. And our work is an example of how international organizations can provide financial resources, technical support, and advocacy training to grassroots women's groups, empowering them to engage more effectively with policymakers. And there's one last challenge that I can't finish without naming, and that is the resistance that we encounter from entrenched, patriarchal, often colonial, political elites who benefit from maintaining the status quo. In many conflict-affected regions and around the world, political power is concentrated and usually very far away from women and marginalized and most impacted communities. And so resistance to change that would empower those groups can manifest in both overt and covert forms, whether it's excluding women from peace negotiations or undermining their contributions through discrimination, discriminatory policies and practices. And we all know that this challenge that I'm naming is generations long and deeply embedded and very difficult to undo. But there is real power in even just naming this and putting a spotlight on it. So much of the patriarchal and colonial power hoarding that we see persists because it goes unnamed and unrecognized. Earlier this year, Madre co-organized a feminist peace summit where we gathered together activists, scholars, and policymakers to strategize together about how to build a more peaceful US foreign policy, one that can be rooted in care and in human rights. And I think that what distinguished our gathering was our insistence that a feminist approach has to be honest. It has to name the harms of militarism, of US hegemony, and it has to demand accountability and reparation for those harms. And if we can do that honest recognition, that can become a common ground that allows us to build solidarity with frontline communities and directly impacted people. So I've said a lot, so I'll sum up right now. Thank you everyone for your patience with me. But my final word is that we desperately need the change that these lessons, implementing these lessons could create. As we look around at all the crises we're surrounded by now, whether it's in Palestine, in Haiti, in Sudan, in Lebanon, there's ample evidence that something fundamentally needs to change. As Corinne was quoting Mia Motley, we need a reset. And ultimately, feminist peacebuilding offers us that holistic and inclusive vision of peace, one that is rooted in justice and in equality, and in a real and strategic recognition of the central role of feminist organizing in creating a more peaceful and equitable world. So thank you all very much for your attention and for inviting me.
Thank you, Diana. We will give time to our participants at the end for questions, and all you need to do is raise your hand and I will unmute you so you can interact with our speakers. And without further ado, we are very fortunate to have with us Louis-Henri, who is the executive director of Lakou, a peacebuilding organization in Port-au-Prince, Haiti since 2012. With over 16 years of experience in the private sector, he holds a business administration diploma from the New York Business School and certifications in conflict transformation from institutions in Ireland and the US. He also completed the Distinguished Humphrey Fellowship on Human Rights and Social Justice at Duke University. Louis-Henri frequently shares his insights through media interviews and articles. Currently, he serves as the Conflict Sensitivity Advisor for USAID HCSP. So thank you, Louis-Henri, for joining us. I'll pass it on to you to share about Lapè's work in Haiti, and also insight about how women-led organizations can contribute to peace building in Haiti.
Thank you, Georgie. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you all. And I like the balance that was established between Diana's presentation and the one that I'm going to make. I'm going to talk more generally about a particular issue in peace building in Haiti, a path forward, and how women can contribute to that path. So I had set a PowerPoint a little bit late. I don't know if you can put it up.
Give me a minute. I don't know. Just... I don't have it yet in my inbox.
Okay.
Do you mind sharing your screen or?
I'll share it. I'll share it from my end.
Okay, thank you.
Here you go.
I can see your
Very
screen.
good?
Yes.
All right, all right.
Very well.
So, first of all, let me say that Lapè is a conflict transformation and peace building organization located in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. We started back in 2012. I started in this process back in 2007, but we started Lapè in 2012. And the idea is that Haiti should be a big family Lakou, you know, where we're all living together and in peace. And that's the vision of us going forward. Now, Lapè works not only on what's going on now, but we try also to work on root causes. There's a lot of work that's done on the issues of gang violence in Haiti, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. People spend millions of dollars in bringing down foreign intervention troops in the country every so many years, but very few people actually work on root causes so that we come out of these cycles of violence that we are experiencing. So the idea for us is to transform the future through deliberately planting seeds in individuals, families, communities, and the nation. Seeds of peace and love in this area. I see that you're raising your hand, Georgie.
Yes, really. Do you mind speaking slower?
Okay.
To help our interpreters catch up. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate
I
that.
don't mind
Thank
at
you.
all. I don't mind at all. So Well, it's necessary to start from the beginning, and we're not gonna stay long on it, but it's fundamental to understand where we're starting from. We're starting from, of course, slavery and the slave trade, and we all know about this. And that's the original trauma, the original sin that has taken us to where we are today. So that's the slave ships that our ancestors came on. Many of them came on, and I was very surprised. A few years ago, I went into a Unfor in Bel Air, Unfor. Most people on this Zoom will know what it is. It's a voodoo ceremony place, and it was deep in the basement of a house in Bel Air, and it was packed to the hilt. And while I stood there, I realized that the place had the form of the bow of a ship. Unconsciously, the people had recreated the slave holding bow of a ship, and that's where they were doing ceremonies. It was packed. There was a mezzanine. It was really full of people, and this issue is still painfully being worked out in people. So over a span of 300 years, we have been traumatized, transported into these slave holding ships, and we have not found a doctor. We never found a doctor. What happened is that this trauma, when you don't transform it, you transmit it, right? And the slavery, we ended with a bloody revolt in 1791, and it was a war of extermination marked by multiple layers of betrayals and ethnic cleansing of the remaining French elements in March 1804. When I was growing up, I thought that the war against the French were the Haitians, the Black Haitians against the white French. And it's only in later years that I understood that it was basically everybody against everybody, and that there were troops brought in by French from Germany and Poland that had actually revolted against the French. So it was really an accumulation of betrayal and murder. Now, this was followed by another betrayal post-independence, as the victorious elites vied with each other to enrich themselves and replace the original colonizers. The only model that they had, and we did not realize that, is that the model of enslaving and subjugating people was deep inside of us, inside of our emotions, inside of our hearts, inside of our head. And we just repeated it. And we just added, through that new betrayal after 1804, more layers of unresolved trauma. The Declaration of Independence in 1804 was not the end. No. We were just getting started. It was not the end of exploitation. We were just getting started. The extraction of wealth, regardless of the human cost, is the colonial model. And that's what we repeated. Internal colonization through establishing structural violence in the economy and in Haitian society. That's the model that was repeated unconsciously, consciously. It's not something that you can kind of blame our predecessors for doing. It's just came on. That's the way it went. So if we do not address the root causes of conflict in Haiti, we will never get through this problem. We will keep on repeating these issues year after year, decade after decade, and we will not come out of the woods with this issue. So whether it's the historical roots, whether it's the poverty, whether it's corruption, whether it's individualism, whether it's the differences of cultural and ethnic backgrounds that you find in Haiti, we have to find a way to mix all of that and become one nation. Right now, we are a melting pot that has not functioned. Besides people from African roots, we have people from Italian roots, from French roots. We have people from Sweden, from Germany here in Haiti. And we have people, of course, from the Middle East, Lebanese, Syrians. We have Jews in Haiti. All of that is a melting pot, and we have to make it work. It has not worked yet. The result of all of this is that we've created a society where there's infinite hunger. Recently, it's been figured out that there's 6 million Haitians that are living on a day-to-day basis, always at the door of starvation. And besides that, we have, of course, an elite, and I'm not taking myself out of it, I'm part of it also, that has wealth, that has the accessibility to financing, to traveling, to moving out when they want, moving about wherever they want by air. Now going by road is a lot more difficult. And until we transform the structural violence that exists in our society, we will have more and more and more problems as the population grows. So, accumulated and unhealed trauma is transmitted. Pain that is not transformed is transferred to our environment, to our children, to our enemies, all around us. The Haitian population is 65% of the Haitian population is under 25. All of these youths, like here, they're young boys, right? In this picture, when they're growing up, they have several issues. The issue of hunger, the issue, a lot of them are living in families with their mothers only. The father figure is not there. And the example that they have of wealth and well-being is the example of the armed men. These are the guys that represent the issue that we have with the gangs. This picture is of the Canaan Boys, who are a group affiliated with the Village de Dieu guys. These gang members start in gang life very early. 9 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old. They start hanging out with the gangs. They start doing little jobs for them. And if the gang is under attack and needs more soldiers, they will fire, they will find guns and weapons for the young guys, and they will have the young, very young kids participate in the war with them. So the Canaan Taliban. This is a map of the situation in Port-au-Prince. It does not include the Artibonite Valley. And one of the questions that we should be answering is, why is it that most of the gang wars are concentrated in Port-au-Prince and in the Artibonite Valley? The answer is very simple. Who controls votes in Port-au-Prince and in the Artibonite Valley control the national elections. There's no need to create a situation in the rest of the country. Control Bel Air, control Martissant, control Cité Soleil. You control the vote in Port-au-Prince. Control the rest of the West Department. You have a big chunk of the election in your hands. You add Gonaïves and the West Department, and you have the national election. It's all about power and getting to power. What's the solution to this? Yes, there is a need for community violence intervention through violence interruption, changing societal norms about violence, finding a path forward towards a nonviolent exit from gang life with justice, not impunity, transitional or restorative justice. If you do not provide a nonviolent exit door for the gangs, they're going to continue resisting, and it will be something that is just unmanageable as it is now. The population is waiting for Bois Calais, and the Bois Calais, of course, is the burning of the gang members, and the gang members know that. So if there's not a serious way out that does not involve them being burned with tires, they will not put down their guns. There has to be individual and collective trauma healing through cognitive behavior therapy, trauma healing processes, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the trauma healing path. You need education, you need vocational training, alternative housing. Once a gang member wants to come out or decides to come out, you cannot stay in the neighborhood anymore. If it's not the whole gang that's coming out of violence, if it's coming out individually, he has to turn in his guns. He cannot go with them. If not, he's a thief and he's liable to be killed. And he has to get out of the neighborhood. So we need alternative housing for them. And then jobs, 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 millions of jobs. This is one thing that you will not hear about at this time. There is no plan for the day after. 60%, 65% of the guys that are in the gangs are there because of work. They're doing a job. If they had other things to do, if they had other jobs, they would not be handling the metal. That's how they call the guns, the metal. Now, the issue is not only at the level of the neighborhoods. It's a society-wide issue. 80%, 85% of the conflicts that are happening at the base of the pyramid in the neighborhoods, in Cité Soleil, in Martissant, in La Saline, in Bel Air, are the results of conflicts at the tip of the pyramid political conflicts, business conflicts by interest groups. And the international community and the diaspora is involved in them also, because that's where the guns and the ammunition are coming from. So the dialogue that has to happen, that needs to happen, has to happen horizontally at the level of the communities, but also vertically with other sectors of society. There needs to be a question asked, why is it necessary for people to use gangs and gang warfare to control elections and to do business? So this is the work that has to be done. Horizontal work at each level of society, but vertical work to transform the conflicts and the situation that we are living in here now. Meet Vladimir. Vladimir is a young man from Madre. He had cut the face of another young guy at school of a girl, and they were both expelled from their school. 1 year later, the other youth exacted revenge on Vladimir with a razor blade at a gathering they both had attended. So, was that the start of more vendetta? No. Vladimir, in the meantime, during that year, had undergone a trauma awareness and training program thanks to Lapè. After his face was cut like that, he decided, because of the training and his understanding of the training, he decided that he would not seek revenge against the other kid. He decided to break the cycles of traumatization. So we at Lapè had this aha experience. It actually works. This is a real life example of this process. And so we were so enthusiastic about Vladimir's decision that I took him up to Cape Haitian. There was a meeting a couple of years ago of the Psychiatrists and Psychologists Association of Haiti, a summit. And so we took Vladimir up to that, and he spoke at that summit. You know, a lot of people were just amazed at his story. And we brought in his the facilitators that had worked with him, and they're pictured above. In hearing Vladimir's story, we saw also his legacy of violence through his father, through his dad. So we went out and we started working with his dad also. And you see the whole family in the bottom picture as we try to work with the dad. But to tell you the truth, the dad did not respond as well as Vladimir did. But we are optimistic and we'll keep on trying. Building children and young people who have done the work of trauma healing, conflict transformation, peace building within themselves, and are ready to replicate it in their families, in their neighborhood, and in their country is key. And in that, we at Lapè have strived to, in our activities, have a balance between women and men, young ladies and young men. The issue of rape as a weapon of war cannot be resolved by men talking to men only, but women sharing in safe spaces what they have lived through and doing mediation work at all levels of society. Our patriarchal and men-led society has so far failed. We have to prepare the ladies, the women, to move forward. And this at all levels of society. I was in Cité Soleil a couple of weeks ago, and I met a young woman who does mediation in Cité Soleil. I said to her, keep at it. You might not be able to do mediation in your own neighborhood with the armed guys, but you can act as a go-between between outside mediators and the armed groups in your neighborhood. So there's work to be done. This is a group of young people that we've been working with since 2015. Some of them have gone into the PNH. Some of them are close to the gangs in Saint-Martin, Bel-Air, and Martissant. Some of them have died, unfortunately. Some of them have moved on thanks to the Biden program. But there's a core group of trained facilitators of dialogue and potential violence interrupters within this group. The violence interrupters have to have access to the gangs to be able to do their work of violence interruption. But they have to be trained and they have to be supervised. It does not happen by chance. And there are also young women that have the capacity to approach and build relationships with the gang members. And we have facilitators in our groups and in this group that do that. The idea is to have an interconnected network of children and young people, actors of change in their environment, interrupting violence in the Haitian society. This is my call to you. A call to an adventure of biblical proportions and greatness. Remember the COVID epidemic, how it had spread? I'm proposing that we seek to infect 5% of the Haitian population with the trauma awareness and healing virus. 12 million Haitians in Haiti, maybe another 3 million in the diaspora. That's in Haiti, 400,000 people. In the diaspora, 150,000 people. It's 40,000 people in Haiti per department to be adjusted based on demographics of each department. It's 2,000 groups of 20 people by department. It may seem like a lot, but when you think of how many churches, how many umfors, Catholic, Protestant, or Vodou there are in each department, and how many people go to those churches, you know, 2,000 groups of 20 people is not a lot. And let them infect others. Seek a tipping point of a positive epidemic in the whole country and in the diaspora. And not only again and again and again, I will repeat it, not only at the grassroots level, it has to be a whole of society approach. If not, it's not going to work. Let's journey together towards reconciliation in Haiti. Mediators are needed. In this picture, you have a business lady that had been kidnapped. And the young man was part of the Saint-Martin gangs. We had worked at Lapè, we worked with both. We worked with business people, including this particular lady, and we worked with gang members and all other sectors of the communities. And we had them meet one day. And this young man was thoroughly enthused at meeting a business person, especially light skin of another class. It's not something that happens frequently. And the reverse was also true. This lady had the courage of trusting me and going down in the neighborhood to meet this other quote unquote kind of people that she really had the opportunity to meet. I have to say that unfortunately, this young man was killed 2 or 3 years ago by another gang member in Madre. And I've missed him. I've missed him because he was a seed planted in the middle of his gang. So thank you very much for listening to me. These are my contacts, and the ladies from the network have them. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis-Henri. We are going to open the floor for our attendees to ask questions. All you need to do is raise your hand and I will unmute you so you can interact with our speakers. So as people are digesting all the insights that has been shared, I want to open the Q&A session with this question. Considering the socioeconomic challenges as well as the political instability in Haiti right now, can you name 3 priorities that actors in the peace building sector should invest their resources and capacity in? And whoever wants to start can take the lead.
Okay, I'll start. One of them is, I think one of the priorities is networking. There's many people that are working in peace building, but we don't know each other. And we don't know in what field they are focusing in and what their approach is. So we have to build that network. The second is to have a holistic approach to this process. You cannot transform this situation by words alone. Words are very important. Relationships are very important. Building community between people is very important. But you also have to bring aid. When I say aid, I'm a bit, you have to bring real opportunities, economic opportunities. One gang member told me one day as I was talking peace with him, there's no peace if you're hungry. There's no peace if you don't have peace in your stomach. So that is part. There has to be a holistic approach and a collective impact search and also there needs to be strong leadership that makes decisions that are good for the people. At this present time, the government does not know what it's doing in terms of how to approach this gang issue. They're hesitating because they have not prepared for this and they're not even consulting the peace building organizations that are, in the country. We're trying, but it's not easy. Diana? Your turn.
Yeah, I think I resonate with a lot of what Louis-Henri was just sharing. I think that in addition to networking, I think there's a point about expanding the definition of what is peace building. And so that people who come from different walks of life or doing different kinds of work can see how their own priorities and lived experience relates to this broader topic of peace building. I mean, I'll just share one anecdote. I recall there was one time, I think it was last year, I was having a conversation with a colleague in another organization about work that we were doing. I believe it was in Yemen. And I was talking about, they had asked me, describe your peace building work there. And I was talking about a project that we had supported around supporting women-led fisheries, and a project that was about girls' schools, and sort of a whole like holistic set of interventions that our partners on the ground were making, that I understood as being all in the service of making peace possible. And then the person at some point interrupted me and said, no, 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 I wanted to hear about peace. You're talking about like economics, you're talking about these other things. Like, I want to hear from peace. And it just really struck me that in my understanding, and I think a lot of Madre's understanding and the work we do with our partners on the ground all around the world, that is the work of peace. I really liked what you just said about, there's no peace unless it's if there's hunger in your stomach, and recognizing those interconnections that then enable people who work on whether it's food security or jobs or economics and so on, so that they can map their own interventions as part of a larger effort towards peace. I think it's more effective, more interconnected, and more feminist. I also think that the real fundamental question about resourcing grassroots organizations is incredibly important. People who are on the front lines, who see day to day, who experience day to day what conflict and war means, and are so to date so under-resourced to be able to do the work that's necessary. I think there's a real question of a call to action for philanthropy and for those who hold pots of funding around the world. What does it look like to move money to grassroots peace builders? And the last thing I'll say is my third point is that there needs to be infrastructure for consultation with those more, with grassroots organizations and with peace builders of all kinds, so that they can shape and influence the direction of policy. I think a lot of the strategies and campaigns that we have to employ to shape a more peaceful policy at the local, national, and international level are often forced to be more ad hoc and put a lot of pressure on civil society to demand access and to demand those channels. And I think that there's work that we could do in partnership, but also putting pressure on policymakers to keep those channels of consultation open in a recurring, reliable, and predictable way.
Thank you, Louis-Henri. Thanks, Diana. I think both of you really touch upon pillars that are essential to not only foster peace building, but also making sure actors, institutions, and people involved in the process can contribute to sustainable results. Now I am going to unmute Karine for a question.
Hi, thank you both so much. I was thinking about when Diana said of how civil society sees this, and that peace building can seem to be so large, to be so much, and what can they possibly do, and looking at peace more as kind of peace transformation, similar to what you said too, Louis-Henri. Everybody has a role to play. Everybody can understand how obviously this is impacting them. You kind of answered my question, which I had written in the chat, is what is the role of the Haitian government in all of this during a time of what I think is still political instability? But really maybe between you and Diana, you both have the experience of being in global spaces and working with other countries or organizations about what can potentially work, but really what is the role and the responsibility of the Haitian government around peace building.
Good afternoon. I'm also Karine. It's
Can
not
we wait for them to answer first and then we'll come back to you?
Oh, okay.
Colleen?
I thought we were gonna, okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. 3 or 4 years ago, I think it was the Jude government or the government before Jude created another iteration of the Commission for National Disarmament, Dismantlement, and Reintegration. But they didn't really believe in it because they never funded it. So they have 9 guys, I think there's 8 guys and one woman that they installed. They have their mandate is legal. It's in the monitor. They have all the tralala, but they never actually gave them the money to actually get down and work. And this present government is still in the same position. 3, 4, 5 years later, they still have not funded the CNDDR. There's another structure that has been created, that was created maybe a couple of years ago with the backing of BNU, the United Nations, which puts together all of the ministries that are supposed to interact with the CNDDR. But again, it's a question of, do they have the will to do it? Does the CPT, do the people at the presidential level who are politicians, whose political fortunes are going to depend on the next elections, do they really have the will of transforming the situation and changing the system from a gang-controlled election to a citizen-controlled election? So this question has to be discussed, openly.
Mhm. Thank you. Diana, did you want to add anything?
I'll just speak briefly, I think more broadly to the role of governments when it comes to peace building nationally and internationally. I agree with the point about, essentially budgets are moral documents. What you spend money on shows what you care about. And so it's a question of accountability that states have to either the promises they make at the national level through their own legislation, but I also should name that states have international human rights obligations when it comes to the kinds of protections within their country that can then support peace and peace building. But of course, all of this is very nice on paper, national law, international human rights protections. But the question always comes up of what does it take to transform those nice words on paper into real change in people's everyday lives. And that relates to the question that has come up, or the point that's come up around political will. Where does will come from? I think there's sometimes a fantasy that if we ask nicely, or if smart people are in power, they will be convinced of the need to act in a certain direction. The will manifest. But I'm a big believer, and I think Madre is a big believer in the role of civil society and movements, and in their power to create pressure that then generates the will that then that can transform national legislation or international human rights into real practice. We often say, that especially when it comes to international human rights, really the only enforcement mechanism that we have are civil society and our movements. And so when it comes to what we've been talking about, like building connections, networking, and resourcing, it is in part about building that pressure base that can force the will, that can force the political will to make policy change that governments need to do.
Thank you, Diana. I think there was a little bit of confusion when I mentioned Karine. Now, Karine, Elise, it's your turn.
Thank you. Yes, I was a little confused.
Apologies.
It's okay, it's okay.
Sorry, Karine.
Pas de problème. Et même nous, même là. Thank you. Thank you, you guys, for your intervention. That was the main point. But as you were talking, what I wanted to know is grassroots. Thank you, Haitian Women Collectives, because that leads into my question. As a small nonprofit just starting off, it was you guys who answered the first call for help in Cité Soleil. So I'm finding that people are hated out when you bring it up, especially if you're a small organization that they don't know yet. So from you all's perspective, especially you, Diana, at your level, when you're bringing up collaborations with small nonprofits, etc., are you finding that it's true that people are hated out? And if you are, is there an aversion to Haiti? Is it realistic to think that there might be more financial opportunities for grassroots? It be same thing for you, Louis-Henri, when you're talking about Lakou, Lapè, you're working with gangs. How are people? We're in the same boat. So how are people approaching the Haiti conversation in terms of long-term financial philanthropic investment? Thank you.
I can share a few thoughts first, and then
Mhm.
I'm really struck by the point that you make about being hated out. I think that there's that is a real dynamic that's unfortunate but real, where certain countries that are experiencing acute moments of crisis may surface in headlines, in international headlines especially, for a short time, and then money and attention follows, and then the spotlight shifts away. And that it is really difficult to, especially in grant making work and in advocacy work, which are the two sides of Madre's strategy, to be consistent and sustained. I mean, we have that commitment, right? But then to be able to work with coalitions and within policy to keep the focus in that way. Am I talking too fast again?
Yes, please do slow down. Thank you.
Apologies. And I think that one of the ways that we are able as Madre to maintain the kind of focus that is needed, the sustained focus that is needed for effective work, is to make connections across crises. So when I mentioned in my earlier remarks all of the various countries that we work in. So when one country is in the news, we can say, not only are these the emergency needs in this particular place, but here's how it connects to work that has been ongoing in another place that maybe is less spotlit at the moment, so that we can create a shared strategy to build the kind of sustained support that is needed across all of the places that require attention and resourcing. And I will say, perhaps this is because just in the past couple of days, I've been in a few conversations about this, but there is this growing recognition that countries and indeed the whole global community are facing polycrises, that we don't have a breath between crises where there's a rise and fall, that is just a constant state of crisis in a lot of places. And so if that's the case, what does that mean for policymaking? What does that mean for philanthropy? I think there's a growing reckoning that is happening in a lot of those places. And I'm seeing more and more that people who control decision-making in those spaces are turning more to feminist funds and grassroots organizations to say, we need to learn, how do we respond when there is no breath between crisis, when every day is crisis, and how do we adapt to that? And I do think that grassroots organizations like those in Haiti have incredible expertise, that if we can connect the dots, and that's a role that Madre can help to play, connect the dots to those conversations that are happening, I think there's a real potential there. And thank you for the question. I don't know if Louis-Henri, if I could pass to you if you had anyone wanted to share on that too.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. Very, very insightful. My answer to the question of hated out, I love the the expression. I had never heard it before. Is that, and I've actually said so in Washington recently. I was at the Peace Conference 2024 on a panel. I've said that we have to ask ourselves the questions why we are repeating the same things year in, year out. I believe that we have to be thinking that we're barking up the wrong tree. There's always money or understanding that there needs to be money for development work, for electricity, for water, for roads, for sanitation. Yes, all of those things are needed. But That's not the issue here in Haiti. For me, the issue here in Haiti, and we're not financing that, is an issue of community for Haitians of all social strata to see each other as human beings, and an issue of leadership, strong level 5 leadership that has worked through its issues of, coming up from backgrounds of scarcity, if I can put it like that. If we don't have a focus on different things, we're going to continue to go into the cycles of repetition of what we've seen for the past 200 years. When you look at what's going on now, and you look at what's going on 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. So people say they are tired of Haiti. Well, if you're asking the wrong question, you're going to get the wrong results. And that's what's going on for me. And we have to do something different. And we have to bring people in a different place.
Thank you.
And now I am going to unmute Susan.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you. I raised my hand a little bit before because then I realized Karen asked exactly the question that I wanted to ask. And my question now is for Diane. I don't know if I pronounced the name well. Because Madre works in different part of the world with women, with grassroots movement, women-led organization. My question is, what commonalities have you noticed in women's struggle for effective participation in political decisions, especially when it's social justice public policies? Thank you.
Wow, that's a big question. I think I'll say first, try to start on a more hopefully inspiring note, which is that the commonalities that we've seen across the work that we do in peace building contexts around the world is that there is an incredible wealth of expertise and action that's happening at the community level. Whenever there is conflict that seizes upon a community, that women and women's networks are extremely active in responding to people's immediate needs, but also in developing and honing a political analysis that can then feed into a more effective kind of policy making. In terms of the obstacles, though, I don't know if this is more what you were alluding to. The obstacles have a lot of commonalities as well. I think there is a way that what is referred to as women's roles, I'm going to quotation marks around it, women's roles and women's work, the caregiving work that happens in those communities, that the burden increases when there is violence or crisis, is seen as something that belongs, that is small, that belongs in the family, in the home, and that is not relevant for policymaking discussions. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles that we've had to overcome, which is to really educate people about the power of women's organizing in spaces that are sort of off the beyond the radar of a lot of policymaking discussions. But in fact, it's in those exact spaces that communities are able to build resilience when there is a conflict that emerges. And where the like, as I was saying, the policy recommendations that we need will come out. I mean, it's really, shocking sometimes to see how the same arguments are used to exclude women, kind of regardless of where we're speaking of, what language we're speaking of. We're told that women should be on a parallel track, that of course what you're doing is important, but we're going to put you over here while the real conversation happens in this room over here. Sometimes it's as stark as like, the hotels where the conversations are happening are like miles apart. So the women's conversation is not integrated into the quote unquote real conversation. So there's a real playbook that is put into place to exclude women's participation. But so that's the negative. But I think what the hopeful part of it is, again, because organizations like Madre and others, we're not the only, play an important role in trying to connect grassroots feminist peace building across those borders so that people feel less alone, but also can learn from each other and build power. I hope I answered your question.
You did. Thank you.
And now I am going to allow Mary to ask the last question for our session. We're a little bit over time, but Mary, you should be able to speak now. Unmute yourself.
Allô?
Allô?
Oui. Thank you, Diana, and thank you, Monsieur Louis-Mars, pour présentation que nous faire. Thank you so much. J'ai une question. I'll speak in English. I'm sorry. Monsieur Louis, you establish the importance of history, and in establishing that history, it is clear that the thread that is consistent in our history in Haiti is a thread of fragmentation and cultural trauma. We are a nation on paper, but much less we are a dissected population in reality. And in the last emergence of banditism in Haiti, we see the fragmentation of the people vowing and fighting for themselves. A highly individualistic position that you identified. And my question is, how do we move the clock so that we can identify who we are as Haitian and develop a sense of acceptance and inclusion so that all of us can be part of this nation? I feel that it is a step that has to be taken before we move to peace building. Because if we don't respect, accept, and care for one another, how do we move the clock in terms of peace building?
Thank you. Thank you, Marie. You actually hit the issue on the head. I said in the beginning that I had started this work back in 2007, and then we created Lapè in 2012. And actually what had happened is that there had been some dialogue since the neighborhood of Saint-Martin, and then from that, it was identified by the neighborhood community members that some of the issues of violence in their neighborhood had its origin with the private sector. And I was tasked by friends to make the connection between the private sector and that dialogue process. And we did. And we went to a retreat of mixed groups, business people and people from the communities, including a couple of gang members. And it was facilitated by myself and an Irish facilitator that we were learning from. And we had people tell their life stories. And we spent the weekend sharing, eating together. We mixed the rooms. We put people from the communities with people from the business community. There were people from the business community that had been or had relatives kidnapped that shared room with gang members. And what happened is that at the end of the retreat, by Sunday morning, it started Friday afternoon, and by Sunday morning, we came into community. So this is what we need to do systematically, build community between people. If I don't know you and you don't know me, I do not care for you as a human being. We have to rehumanize each other. It does not happen by chance. You have to actually set it up. Coming into community is not something that you can automatically make happen, but you create the container and you put in the mix of people and you do some exercises to see if it comes up. And if we are here today, if Lapè is here today, it's because of that original experience of coming into community with people from different social backgrounds. We had a millionaire in the group, and there were very, very poor people in the group, and we all reconsidered ourselves as human beings. Thank you, Diana, for participating. I know that you have to leave, and this was the last question. But Marie, it has to be systematically done. It doesn't happen every time that you come into community through this kind of process, but we have to systematically be doing it. And we try to do that at Lapè.
I thank you so much. And thank you, Diana, for the presentation. I learned a lot from it. And I want to encourage Karine Jocelyn. I want to encourage you to bring the women together again, because we had such a dynamic experience last November. And it has to carry throughout Haiti so that we can have a model emerging to bring us closer to peace in Haiti. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you to both of our speakers. I was actually going to close out with that. Thank you to some of our partners who also participated today. That, I think what Karine said also is it's capacity, it's time. But part of the role of the Haitian Women's Collective is convening folks and having conversation. And we will make a commitment to do that in the near future. And we know that both Madre, who has been a great supporter from the beginning, as well as the knowledge of Louis-Henri, will help to guide what can we possibly do even with little resources. I think we have some power that we can move something forward in the near future, and we will figure out what that is. Again, I want to thank all of you for your participation today. The interpreters, thank you so much. We had to do a few tests during the week. I want to thank Georgie Pierre, who's been working on special projects with us, and he did the call when I said we need to start talking about peace, and also Ruth Marcelin, who is our coordinator in Haiti, who is there every day, and so many more of you there also who have been supportive of the collective in our future direction. I thank you and look forward to seeing you again during our next webinar. Take care, everybody. Have a